best will be. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
We are in Luke chapter 16. We had talked about that last week. Now we're getting into the hard part this week. So, Luke chapter 16, and we'll start with verse 19 down to about 22 here. Excuse me, NIV version. Said, there was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, and longed to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. Okay. So, the rich man, if you recall, when we started in chapter 16, we had a rich man. Now we have a rich man is portrayed as extremely wealthy. Comparing it to our time, we could say the richest man on earth. He was extremely wealthy, and on a daily basis, he was dressed in purple and fine linen. Now, he was dressed in purple. That means every day he wore a purple suit. Now, the Lord didn't give him a name, but he did tell us that the man wore a purple suit. So why did he do that? You know, I got to ask myself that question. You know, why? Now, the rich man at the beginning, we didn't hear anything about him wearing purple suits or fine linen. The fine linen would be the undergarments. But here, we're told that he wore a purple suit. So the Lord, he wanted us to know that this rich man was very, very wealthy. And the clothes that he wore, the reason he mentioned purple is because the clothes that he wore came from Egypt. And the purple dye, it came from sea snails. And it was very, very costly to turn that into this purple dye. So it meant that this man was rich. So, like the rich man in another one of Christ's parable, which was in chapter 12, you don't have to turn to that, but his motto in life was, well, just take things easy, drink, and be merry. That was his motto. Well, this man was happily, joyfully living in splendor every day. So, in contrast to his, shall we say, extravagant lifestyle, on the other side of the picture was the desperate situation of the poor man. Now, poor describes a person in a state of most extreme poverty. Now, the original Greek, or the original word, does not mean beggar. That's what NIV uses. They use beggar. But this man was not a beggar. He was a poor man. And in my opinion, I think it should have been translated that way. He was extremely, extremely poor. He wasn't a beggar, but he was poor. Now in Galatians chapter 4 verse 9, it's translated worthless. Worthless. So Jesus shows this man as having nothing. He was destitute. Now for us, you know, to compare for us today, that we could can more understand it. I mean, he was broke. He was penniless. He was poor. He was poverty-stricken. He didn't have one penny to rub against the other. Now, verse 20, NIV version we'll use. He said, and at his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores. So, in addition to his poverty, he was naked. He was covered with oozing, open lesion sores. Now, it says that he had been laid, but the word actually means thrown at the rich man's gate, probably at the entrance of his courtyard to his house. So, in Jesus' time, remember, there was no welfare, there was no Medicare, there was no one to take care of a sick person. They were on their own. So this man now evidently was paralyzed. He couldn't move. So he had been abandoned by those who, there was some, whether it was family or what, I don't know, but there was some that had been taking care of him. That's the reason I say he was not a beggar. See, back in those days, like I said, you took care of yourself. And so there were those, even as today, some have actually got rich by being a beggar. You know, I read a story one time, a guy in New York City. He started out going to a street corner, and he sat there all day long just begging. And eventually, that guy got so wealthy from begging now that he had his chauffeur bring him in, drop him off, and then leave, and then come back at night and pick him up. So begging actually was a business, and so it was in this day. So what they would do, these beggars, is they would go, they'd pick out a place where they knew that wealthy people was going to be. And so they would go to that place, and then they would beg from people. Now this man, he didn't have that opportunity, or if you would call it that, to go someplace and beg. He had people that he had to depend on, and so these people were taking care of him, and it got to the point where they could no longer take care of him. So in hopes that the rich man that already surveyed this and already picked out the place, so their hope was that the rich man would take care of him. So what they did was I'm assuming probably at night, when they couldn't be observed as much as in the day. So they took this man, Lazarus, and they threw him as close to the gate as they possibly could, and then they got out of there as fast as they could, because they didn't want to be caught dropping this man off. Because if they were caught dropping this man off at the rich man's gate, then they would tell him, hey, don't do that, you take this guy and get him out of here. So what they did was they came along fast as they could, threw the guy off, and then got out of there. Well, unfortunately, the rich man, he didn't take notice, even though he passed this poor man every time that he went in and out of his gate. He did nothing to help this poor man that was suffering as he was. So this was the way that the Pharisees and the scribes were. They would not be bothered with any person that they was not at least equal with them or better than them. And so in this case, this guy was a insignificant, unimportant individual. And I suppose as far as the rich man was concerned, he was nothing more than trash that somebody had thrown off to get rid of, and it happened to land at his place. Now, before we go any farther, we need to ask ourselves this question, because this is an extremely important question. And I will say this to you now, that I'm out there in left field pretty much by myself here. We have to ask ourselves the question, is this a parable? Now, what is a parable?
Story.
It's a made-up story, right. It's a made-up story. Now, Jesus often used parables. That is a made-up story. It didn't happen. But the story was to bring across a point And he often did that with the Pharisees and with the scribes. All right, we're in chapter 16. In the NIV version, I just want to point this out. Just happened to pop in my mind here. I want to point this out. When we first started with chapter 16, now NIV has a tendency to do this. They put at the top before it starts, like verse number 1. Jesus told his disciples. Well, right above that, okay, they highlight what they think this is. So here they have the parable of the shrewd manager. Okay? Now, we're going down to, so what are they saying? This is a parable, right? They're saying this is not true, okay? This is a story, and it's intended for the Pharisees and the scribes. Now, let's go down to verse 19. Now, what does the caption say there?
The rich man.
The rich man and Lazarus. It doesn't say that this is a parable. It just says the rich man and Lazarus. So NIV has determined, and the reason they put that the first one was a parable. The second one, if it's not a parable, then what is it?
True story.
It's the truth. Now, see, there's a lot depending on this, and I wrestled with this and wrestled with this. I got like, and I'm not bragging, so don't misunderstand. I got like between 15, 20 commentaries. Now, commentary is another person's opinion and another person's translation of the scriptures. Now, that's important because when you're translating it, you got to know what you're talking about. But there was only 2 out of all of those that said it wasn't a parable. That it was a parable. That was the consensus of it. And that is the same thing today. But see, here's our problem. See, I know I've used this illustration before, but and it deals with me too. I don't mean to, but I have to deal with this. See, we live in this box. We call it our world. But it's a world of time. In other words, it had a beginning and it has an end. Now, this box, and we don't know how vast this is, but this box sits inside of the spiritual world. Now, there's only one way that we can get out of this box, and that is we have to die. But the way I vision is there's walls in this, and we're in here. We don't know what's on that other side. The Lord has not said very much about the spiritual world. And so, if we don't know much about it, we don't know what is out there. And so the only way that we can interpret is by what we know that is on the inside. That's what we can understand. And I figured this out. The tendency is that if you can't explain it, then we'll call it a parable. But see, for me, that means that we're missing a lot. See, if there's something that we cannot explain and cannot understand, I'm saying let's do not discard that. Because we don't know. So let's not discard it. Let's consider it. And that's where we're at here. So we need to know, is this a parable, a story made up, because there's a lot depending on it, or is it a true story? Well, I believe, and I pray for this, and hopefully y'all along with me on this, but because believe me, I get more out of this than you all will ever get out of it. But I pray often for the Lord to lead us deeper into this. Now, I know one of these days, before too long probably, I'll know these things because I'll be going over there. And I'll know, but the problem is I can't come back and tell you. So there's only one person that ever left this earth, and that was the Apostle Paul. that went up into heaven. But then he said he heard inexpressible things up there. Things that man cannot reveal. So he went up to heaven, but he was told by the Lord, keep your mouth shut. You don't say anything about what you saw up here. So he had a lot that he could say, but he wasn't allowed to say. And so I know that the Lord Jesus Christ came to this earth to save sinners. Now what I mean by that is the Lord Jesus Christ came to this earth because his Father wanted a family. And that was his job, was to come down here and pick out that family. And those who get baptized, they have an opportunity. They're added to the family. They don't have to stay there, but at that time they're added to. I also believe that Jesus came to acquaint us with another world, a world that one day we're going to be in. And I believe that he does exactly that here. I'm basing everything on the fact that this is a true story. And I think that I can prove it as we go along. But that is a decision that is essential as we go through this. So my point would be, I guess, why would the Lord give us such an in-depth detail, a solid detail of a story, if it didn't matter? See, I use quite often what I call common sense theology. Sometimes, if you let the scriptures interpret themselves, they'll interpret themselves, but we twist them trying to make them what we want them to say, and when we can't do that, then we say, well, this is a story. It doesn't mean anything. So actually, if this is just a story, a parable, then you could take everything that has been said in here and throw it away because it doesn't mean anything. The only thing that it would mean is that he was trying to get something across to the scribes and the Pharisees at that particular time. So for us, it wouldn't mean anything. So the first rich man was a parable. It was just a made-up story. This rich man existed. He existed. He was here. So what we had then, so you got to see, those who believe that it's a parable also say that the rich man that we're talking about here was the same rich man that started out with in verse number 1. But if I remember correctly, the Lord separated those two. This was a rich man, that's all he said. This one was a rich man who wore purple, which meant he was richer than the rich man in the beginning. So what we have here, in my opinion, is a story of two rich men. So this rich man is a little richer than the first. So this one wore purple, a purple suit every day. Now, verse number 20, if you'll notice, well, let me read that again, because I've done a lot of talking there in between. Verse 20, NIV version. We take our time, get it right. In verse 20, he says, at his gate was laid, and I cleared that up, was thrown a poor man by the name of Lazarus, covered with sores. Now, I want you to note something there. Now, Jesus gave this poor man, a name. Now, the name that he gave the poor man, Lazarus, is important. It's very important. If you remember, it's the same name of the brother of Mary and Martha. And by the way, as far as I know, this is the first time that Jesus gave a name to someone in one of his stories. So it has to have significance. Now, Lazarus is the Greek translation of the Hebrew name Elazar, which means whom God has helped. It's to me, it's an appropriate name because it symbolizes the only way that this poor man was able to get into paradise. Now, some say that he went to heaven, but that's not true. Now remember, this is before the Church of Christ started. That's important to remember. Before the Church of Christ started. Now what did that mean? There was no access to heaven. So at that time, all who died went where? Down into Hades. That was the holding spot. They went down to Hades. Hades is down. Heaven is where?
Up.
Up. Yeah. So to the rich man and the I might say the Jewish society, Lazarus, that we have a name to now, he was nameless. When they threw him out there at that gate, he was nameless. He was insignificant, unimportant, didn't mean a thing. But Jesus gave him, that poor man, he gave him a name that described what God did for him. Now also by giving him a name, I think Jesus, he also made it clear that the rich man's brothers, this rich man had 5 brothers, the rich man's brothers would recognize him as the same man who lay at the gate had Lazarus been sent back to warn those 5 brothers, which were told in verse 27. So, in contrast, the rich man, who would have been, well, he would have been widely known. Just like the richest man on the earth today, right? I don't think there's anybody that doesn't know his name. Everybody knows his name. Everybody. Well, it'd be the same thing here. This was a rich man, so he was very widely known. Jesus, though, did not give him a name. Now, later tradition calls him, Dives, D-I-V-E-S. But Dives, it's not a proper name. Dives is just a Latin word for rich. So in essence, that's all they call it. So, we could speculate all we wanted to. I thought maybe we would, but it's a waste of time because we just don't know why Jesus did not give him a name. He had a name. He was a real man. He was a real rich man. Jesus told us everything else about him except his name. So we can speculate all we want about that, so we won't take the time, waste of time on that, because we just don't know why he did not. Now, verse 21, NIV version, Luke 16, and verse 21. And, I'll go 20 and then 21, at his gate was thrown a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. So, we have a man here, poor man, thrown out at the gate of the rich man, and he wanted to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. So, the crumbs, the reason that is inserted here and is important, back in those days, not like today, they didn't have napkins and things like that to clean their hands with. So what they did was they used stale bread, and they would get the stale bread and rub it around in their hands like that to clean their hands, and then when they were done, they would just throw it off to the side. Some of it fell onto the table, some fell along the side, didn't make a difference. But it was stale bread that was used by the dinner guests to clean their hands, and then it was just tossed aside for the dogs to eat. Now in verse 20, it tells us that he was covered with sores. Covered with sores, just like, the book of Job, sitting in the ashes, covered with sores. Now, to be sick and weak in the body is, we all know that, because it's bad. You're weak and you're sick and it's bad. But to be naked and your body full of oozing, open, pus-filled sores, I mean, that would be something else. You know, if you have a sore, you know how it itches, you know, and you're always scratching it. Well, this man, his whole body was covered with these, and you know, after a period of time, this guy was naked, and you know that they're going to get infected, and which makes it worse yet, and it's just hard to describe. I mean, that would have been extremely, and especially when the man was paralyzed, that would have been extremely painful. Now, verse 21, and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table, and even the dogs came and licked his sores. Now, dogs in biblical time, they were not domesticated dogs like we have today. They were what we might call semi-wild scavengers. Now some say, and it could be, which would make sense if you use common sense here, some say that being a rich man, that they had a kennel of dogs, just for his pleasure, and they were well fed to the full. When poor Lazarus, he couldn't get enough to eat to keep himself alive, and so the dogs, which would have been permitted in the compound, would have been permitted to run around. The dogs would come and lick those sores. And the sores were, they were bloody and pus-filled and oozing, and I imagine that's what actually attracted the dogs to come and lick them, which I would say gave Lazarus some relief, because we're not told in this that anyone run the dogs off. We're not told that Lazarus even hollered, "Get the dogs away from me," or tried to get the dogs away. So evidently their coming and licking his sores must have been a relief for him to a degree anyway. And so actually the dogs were actually more kind to this man than the rich man or the rich man's brothers were to him, as shame as that may seem. Now in verse 22, it tells us, he said, "And the time came when the poor man died, and the angels," now that has an S on it, "carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried." So the poor man died, and he was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. Now, Abraham's bosom, I just wanted to point this out. Abraham's bosom appears nowhere else in the Bible. This is the only place that it appears, is Abraham's bosom. So it's a technical term for the home of the Old Testament saints. Remember, until Christ's death and resurrection. Now, let's turn to, I'm going to read this from the King James Version. Let's turn to Ephesians, because this is so important. So in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8 and 9. Verse 8 and 9. Now remember, this is King James Version. He says, "Wherefore he saith," now we're talking about Jesus Christ. Let me give you, an update on it. We're talking about the Lord Jesus Christ hanging on the cross, getting ready to die. Okay, now he died. They put him in the tomb, rolled a stone in front of it. Okay, now we'll pick up here. "Wherefore he said, when he ascended up on high, he led captives captive and gave gifts unto men. In verse number 9, now that he ascended, what is it but that he first descended first into the lower parts of the earth? Okay. Now, what I want to do here is I want to go to Luke 23. And we want to look at verse 39. 39. Okay. All right. Now, we'll go 39 down through like 43. Okay, now remember, Jesus is hanging on the cross here now. Okay, in Luke. We'll get to this later on in a little bit more detail. But right now, I just wanted to pinpoint one thing here. He said, now Jesus is hanging on the cross, okay? You have Jesus in the middle. You have a criminal on the right-hand side. You have a criminal on the left-hand side. Okay, they're hanging there. All three are going to die. Okay, now, one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at Jesus. And he said, aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. And the other criminal said, don't you fear God, he said? Since you're under the same sentence, that is, he means all three of them are going to die. He said, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. In other words, they were thieves, and they were sentenced to death. And so it was just that they get what they did. But then he goes on to say, but this man has done nothing wrong. Now remember the rich man. Okay, now, back in Ephesians 4:9. Now it said, today, let me read that again. Ephesians 4:9. Yeah, where's it at here? Okay. Jesus said, today you will be with me in paradise. Where's it at? You get
4:9.
Okay, let's see.
Let me read it.
Huh?
Let me read it.
It says that, I need that word today. Today, he said it. He said to the thieves. It had to be after, well, it wouldn't be, that would be back in Luke. What am I doing here?
Luke.
Yeah, it'll be back in Luke 39, or 39. Luke 23, verse 39. I knew something like this would happen. I knew it would, because this is so important. Okay, 39. Okay, yeah, this is the one I want. I was confused. I was over in there. So, okay, so verse 39 says, one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him, that is Jesus, and he said, aren't you Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. He said, don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence? And in verse 41, he says, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our works deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. And then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Now here's what I wanted to get to. Jesus answered, but I tell you the truth, today, okay, now that's important, today you will be with me in paradise. Today. Now remember, Jesus was hanging on the cross. Jesus was going to die that day. They put him into the tomb that day. And Jesus is saying to that thief on the cross, today you're going to be with me in paradise. Now remember, under the Old Testament, everybody went down. Everybody went down. And that's why the King James Version has it first. Okay, so we got that squared around. So he says, today you will be with me in paradise. All right, now remember, before the Church of Christ, all who died went down into Hades, a holding spot. No one went up. No one went up. So while Jesus was in the grave, this is Ephesians 4:9. While Jesus was in the tomb, because they wanted to get him in there before the Sabbath came. So they put him in there Friday night. Okay, while he was in the tomb, spiritually, he did two things, which is very important now. First thing is, as it says in Ephesians 4:9. Let me read that again now here, because this is very important. In verse number 8, wherefore he saith, when he ascended on high. Ascended means what? Up. Up. Okay? When he ascended up, he led captives. That is, those that were held in the holding spot. And he gave gifts unto men. And then it says, now that he ascended, in other words, that he went up, what is it but that he also descended? Now this is important. What did he descended what? Did he go up first or did he go down first? He went down first. That's where a lot of these people are missing the boat here. He went down first. He went down. See, he descended down to the lower parts of the earth. That being what? Hades. See, but the part that he went to now, Jesus, the part that he went to, is he went down to Abraham's bosom. That's the part. That's paradise. Paradise. So why did he go there? He went up to see the Father. But before he went up to see the Father, he went down to paradise. Now remember, paradise is where? Down. Right? And what did he tell the thief? He said, today, I'll be with you in paradise. So in other words, when that thief died on the cross, not his body, but he went down into, instead of going where actually he would normally went, Hades, in the place of torment, he went over to Abraham's bosom. Now why did he go there? Jesus said, today I'll be with you in paradise. Because he defended Jesus. Now remember, this was before the Church of Christ. This was before baptism. This was before, back in those days, all you had to do was believe. Believe. If you were a Jew, which they were, then you had to be obedient to God. That was it. Nothing could get you in heaven. Nothing could get you in hell. You went to a holding spot. So this man here deserved actually the thief. That's what he said. We're getting our just desert. I mean, we're a bunch of thieves. We need what we're getting. But Jesus, he hadn't done anything. And Jesus told him, said, well, today you're going to be with me in paradise. And so, why did Jesus go down to paradise? That's the important thing here. Why did he go down there? He went down there to tell them something. Now the scripture says he went down and he preached to them, but he didn't actually preach. He went down there with a message. He went down there to tell them, hey, today you are getting out of here. Can you imagine the excitement there must have been in that place at that time? Those people have been in there for I don't know how long. Every time a person died, went down into there. And all at once the Lord Jesus Christ shows up. Now how they recognized him, I have no idea. But he went down there to tell them that today you're coming out of here. Today you're going with me. Today you're going up. We're getting rid of this place here. And so he leads them, that's why it says he led captives captive. He led a train. So those who were captive in that area there were taken out of there. And you could just visualize as the disciples were standing there watching, talking to Jesus, and Jesus all at once just started to going up into the air, and they were just watching him as he goes. Well, this will be the same scene here. Jesus just goes, and all these that are behind him are going with him, and he's taking them right up to be where God is. See, Jesus was bringing the Old Testament saints. He was grandfathering them in. He was taking the Old Testament saints out of paradise up to the throne of God. So he led captives captive. See, Christ took those believers, I'm talking about the Old Testament now, those believers with him out of paradise into the very presence of God when he ascended up. He ascended, yes, but first he descended because he had to do that. So my point is that today paradise is up, not down, not down. See, when we go today, when we pass on today, it says here that angels, with an S, took Lazarus into the bosom of Abraham. Well, I don't know if that holds true today or not. I'm assuming it probably does. So more than one. But I was always under the impression that our guardian angel couldn't prove it one way or the other, but would be the one who would take us to be with the Lord. But there may be other angels that are assigned to that particular task also, because it's very important for it's very important. You don't know, because it wouldn't be the first time that the devil got in the way of other angels doing their job to keep them from getting the job done. So getting us now, that's not the end of the job. Getting us from the time we die, getting us, our spirit up to be with God, anything, because remember, the devil is the prince of what? He's the prince of the air. So he could interfere by trying to keep us from getting up there. So maybe it takes more than one angel to get the job done. I don't know. But anyway, it tells us that angels take us up there. So the poor man, he died, diseased and starving as he was. There was no burial for him, no funeral for him, no worldly honors, so to speak, for him. But honor came from paradise as he was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. Now, I want you to know something here. It does not say his body was carried away. It doesn't say that. The angels carried him away. That is his spirit, his soul, no body. But, there would have not been a burial anyway in his case, because his body would have actually been thrown into a dump. There was a cliff on the back of where Jerusalem was built. It was like thousands of feet down there, and it was called Gehenna. It was a dump where everybody threw everything, and it just burnt all the time. Had a terrible stench that came from it, and that's what they did with the poor people that couldn't afford to be buried or anything like that. They just took their body up there and threw it over into the dump down there and let it burn. So anyway, all right, verse 22. Yeah, let me get over here to the other page here, verse 22. Well, I'm still in 23. I'm sorry. I went back in 16. I'm a little clumsy here today.
What verse you want?
Okay, verse 22. It says, Luke 16, verse 22, says, the time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's bosom, and the rich man also died and was buried. So the rich man also died, but unlike the poor man, the rich man was buried. No doubt, we're not told, but no doubt such a man would have probably been honored with an elegant type of a funeral. I mean, he was a rich man. So they would have probably, back in those days, they hired mourners to come in, and they cried and they mourned and such. They were paid to do that, but they mourned and cried over the dead person, and it would have probably been an elaborate type of a casket and etc. And they probably would have paraded his body around through the streets as they do, the rich people. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything less. All right, now verse 23 down through 26 here. So in hell, now that actually means Hades. In hell, where he was in torment. Talking about the rich man now. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away, with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I'm in agony in this flame. But Abraham replied, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he's comforted here, and you're in agony. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm, a great space has been fixed, so that those who want to go where you are going to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross from there to us. So the rich man's body was buried, and I would assume in full treatment given to the corpse. So his eternal soul, however, went to Hades. But in the Old Testament, it uses the word Sheol, which is equivalent to the New Testament term Hades, which it was in general sense referred to the world of the dead. That's what it actually doing. So, in other words, it was a holding place for the damned, for those who were and are going to hell. Today, the non-Christian goes there when they die. So Hades is still in existence today, just like heaven is in existence today. Hades is still in existence today. Now, I believe, this is my personal belief, using common sense theology, I believe that that Hades is literally the entrance to hell. Because paradise now, that was down there, was the entrance to heaven. So when those who were in paradise, when Jesus went down, see, he didn't take paradise as a paradise. He took the people and the comfort being with Abraham and etc. from that place, because there, see, they could look over and they could see this rich man in torment. And the rich man could look over and see them. But that's not the case, see, now today, because, heaven is up and that is down. So I believe that that is, we don't know where hell is, but I believe that's probably the holding spot for hell. Because what did it say? It said that this man was in fire. He was in flames. And I've tried to visualize this. Did you ever burn your finger or something like that? Stupidly, now this goes back a couple years, I had a cast iron skillet on the stove and I forgot. And it had food in it and it was hot. And I grabbed a hold of it. I immediately let go. But yet today, I'll still get sometimes a sensation of that burning feeling in the tips of my finger. But when you do something like that, you get little blisters on you and etc. Okay, but here was a man who was in flames. Now it says that he lifted up his eyes. Which actually means what? If he was looking down. I'm thinking that he was looking at himself because he was on fire. He was in flames. And he raised his head up and looked, and he seen Abraham. But you're in flames, but you're not burning, but yet you have the feeling of being burnt. And to be able to then carry on a conversation, as painful as flames are, is to me is something in itself. I can't visualize my whole body being burnt. Yeah, you know, my mind, you just can't get a hold of it. I've tried, but it just doesn't want to get a hold of it. So we're unfortunately we're out of time. This is going to end up probably being part 1, 2, and 3, probably. But I want you to understand something here, because we're starting to get into really, we really have to answer some big questions here. But Jesus here, he's giving us just a little glimpse into the spirit world. Now remember, we live in a box. That's our world. We know very little about the spiritual world. But as we advance, and I'm positive of this, as we advance in our knowledge, Jesus gives us just a little bit more. Now, he won't give us more than what we could handle, but he gives us just a little bit more. And it says he lifted up his eyes, indicating that he was fully aware of where he was. He was in a state of separated souls. He was in misery. He was in torment. And there's no rest day or night for those who are in Hades. And that's just a taste. That's just a taste of what is to come for them. It's just, I don't know, it's just, you know, there's things that we can get from this what the Lord wants us to understand, you know. We know one thing for sure, and we're going to close here, that hell really exists. You know, preachers today, they don't preach on heaven and hell. If they preach on anything, it'll be heaven, and everybody's going to heaven. But if anything, as we get out of this, there is a hell. It does exist. It's a place that we don't want to go to. It's a place that you avoid, because when you go there, you're going to be in flames. You're going to be burning. I've never seen something that burns that doesn't burn up. But that's going to be with us. So then we get into another question. When he looked down, what did he see? What is a soul? Can a soul burn? Does a soul have a form? Does a soul have eyes? He lifted up his eyes. He had a tongue. Lazarus had a finger. And of all things, there was water there. In paradise, there was water. That Lazarus could dip the tip of his finger into that water. And I would assume that by the time he got there to there, that it would evaporated anyway. Well, we're going to close there. Lord willing, we'll pick up next week and get into some other things.